3:41 a.m. Gulf Standard Time, 1,840 nautical miles. That is the distance between the Strait of Hormuz and the Strait of Bab-el-Mandeb, the two maritime choke points that together control the flow of approximately 35% of the world's seaborne energy supply. The Hormuz Strait connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and the Indian Ocean. The Bab-el-Mandeb Strait connects the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden and the Indian Ocean. Both straits are flanked by Iranian-aligned military capability. The IRGC and IRGCN on the northern Hormuz shore, and Houthi forces on the Yemeni coast overlooking Bab-el-Mandeb. Both straits had been studied by every naval planner in the world as a coordinated closure scenario. No one had executed that scenario simultaneously before. At 3:41 a.m., both straits activated at the same moment. In the Strait of Hormuz, from IRGCN, fast attack positions at Bandar Abbas, Larak Island, and the northern approaches to the strait, 53 Noor anti-ship cruise missiles launched simultaneously on bearing toward the carrier strike group operating 170 nautical miles northwest of the strait in the Central Gulf. Simultaneously, 4 IRGCN Fateh-class submarines, diesel-electric, operating in the shallow water environment of the southern Gulf approaches where U.S. anti-submarine warfare geometry was degraded by thermal layering, activated their targeting systems and began approach runs toward the carrier's projected track. And from coastal positions on Keshem Island, 11 Khalij Fars anti-ship ballistic missiles lifted on trajectories targeting the carrier group and the two Aegis destroyers on its outer screening line. In the Strait of Bab-el-Mandeb, 1,840 nautical miles to the southwest, the Houthi Armed Forces Missile Command activated a coordinated launch sequence from positions in the Hudaida and Taiz governorates. 61 Shahed, 136 loitering munitions, 19 Birkin 2H ballistic missiles, and a simultaneous deployment of 34 naval mines from 4 fast attack craft operating without lights in the southern approach channel to the strait, the shipping lane through which 6.2 million barrels of oil transited daily on the route from the Persian Gulf to the Suez Canal. Total simultaneous action: 53 Noor cruise missiles and 11 Khalij Fars ASBMs in the Gulf. 4 IRGCN submarines in attack posture. 61 Shahed 136 loitering munitions, 19 Birkin 2H ballistic missiles, and 34 naval mines in the Red Sea. 2 theaters, 1,840 nautical miles of separation. 1 command decision that had been coordinated between Tehran and the Houthi command structure over a period of 9 months through an encrypted communications relay in Oman that U.S. signals intelligence had been monitoring, and had been monitoring knowingly, allowing it to remain active because it was generating collection value, until 7 days ago, when the intelligence assessment had shifted from monitoring to urgent, and the relay had been taken offline. The relay had been taken offline 7 days ago. The operation it had been used to plan had already been finalized. The strategic logic of the simultaneous activation was architectural. A single theater strike against the Hormuz carrier group could be absorbed by the U.S. defensive architecture without creating an operational decision crisis. A single theater drone swarm at Bab-el-Mandeb could be absorbed by the Red Sea carrier group and its escorts without creating an operational decision crisis. But a simultaneous dual theater activation created a decision that no single command could resolve: which theater received priority for the limited pool of SM-3, SM-6, and Aegis BMD capacity that the U.S. maintained in the region. The Gulf carrier group faced the more technically demanding threat: ASBM and submarine. The Red Sea carrier group faced the higher volume threat: drone swarm and mines. Each theater could manage its assigned threat category in isolation. The question the IRGC's planners had spent 9 months calculating was whether both theaters could manage their respective threats simultaneously, while the U.S. command structure was dividing its attention its electronic warfare assets, its maritime patrol aircraft, and its standoff strike inventory between two engagements 1,840 nautical miles apart. The calculation had one embedded assumption that would prove incorrect: that the U.S. would need time to make the prioritization decision. That decision had been made in advance. CENTCOM's contingency planning for a dual straight simultaneous activation scenario, designated in the planning cycle as the most complex naval threat in the regional theater, had produced a pre-coordinated response architecture that assigned specific assets, specific authorities, and specific response sequences to each theater independently. The dual theater scenario had its own execute package. It did not require a prioritization decision. It required recognition. Recognition occurred at 3:41 a.m. and 22 seconds. The space-based infrared system detected the Khalij Fars launch signatures over Keshem Island and the Birkin 2H signatures over Hudaydah Governorate at 3:41 a.m. simultaneously. Two separate launch events in two separate geographic sectors of the CENTCOM area of responsibility, logged as a joint alert at 3:41 a.m. and 22 seconds. The CENTCOM watch officer read both alerts on the same display update cycle. She recognized the dual theater pattern in 4 seconds and transmitted the dual theater execute authorization at 3:41 a.m. and 28 seconds. 6 seconds from first alert to execute authorization. The pre-coordinated response architecture activated across both theaters simultaneously. In the Gulf, the carrier group had been at heightened readiness since 11 p.m. the previous evening. The IRGCN submarine contact report from the P-8 Poseidon on patrol in the southern Gulf approaches had elevated the group's anti-submarine warfare posture 6 hours before the strike began. The 4 Fateh-class submarines had been assessed as a threat since the P-8's contact at 9:44 p.m. The group had not broadcast that assessment. It had positioned its ASW helicopters and its escort vessels to deny the submarine contact's approach geometry while appearing to maintain normal patrol operations. The Khalij Fars ASBM engagement activated immediately. SM-3 Block 2A from the lead Aegis destroyer, which had pre-solved 11 ballistic tracks against the Keshem Island launch coordinates during the 18 minutes of elevated readiness, since the P-8 had logged the submarine contacts as precursors to an imminent operation. 11 tracks, 11 engagement solutions, preloaded and waiting for the launch signatures that appeared at 3:41 a.m. 8 of the 11 Khalij Fars were intercepted in mid-course and early terminal phase within the first 4 minutes of the engagement. 2 required terminal phase SM-6 engagements after mid-course intercept attempts that were complicated by the weapon's late flight maneuvering capability. 1 Khalij Fars, the 11th track, which had been assigned to the second destroyer in the engagement sequence, arrived in its terminal phase while that destroyer's fire control system was processing the resolution of its previous engagement. The gap was 1.3 seconds. The SM-6 was released 1.3 seconds into the gap and intercepted the track at 3,800 meters altitude, 22 nautical miles from the carrier. The intercept confirmed. The 1.3-second gap had not been sufficient. The 53 Noor cruise missiles from the Gulf coastal launches were engaged by the CEC integrated Aegis network simultaneously with the ASBM sequence, the same fire control architecture dividing its engagement capacity between the two threat categories in real time. SM-6 and SM-2 handled the outer and mid-range cruise missile engagement zones. 41 of the 53 Noor missiles were neutralized in the outer engagement zone. 12 entered the inner defensive perimeter. CIWS on 3 escorts engaged simultaneously. 9 were neutralized at close range. 3 penetrated to within 600 meters of the formation. 2 were neutralized by the carrier's own CIWS. The third, its guidance partially degraded by the Growler's jamming package, altered course at 400 meters and impacted the sea surface 180 meters off the carrier's starboard bow. The water column was visible from the bridge. The carrier was undamaged. The submarine threat required the most sustained engagement of the Gulf sequence. The 4 Fateh-class contacts had been tracked since 9:44 p.m. 3 had been maneuvering toward firing positions in the shallow water corridor southwest of the carrier's track, exactly the approach geometry that thermal layering in the southern Gulf degraded U.S. sonar performance against. The ASW helicopters had been working those contacts for 6 hours. At 3:41 a.m., all 3 active contacts accelerated to attack speed simultaneously, the same coordinated timing that had activated the surface and ballistic missile threat. The coordination confirmed what the tracking contacts had suggested. These were not independent contacts. They were elements of the same operation. 2 Mk-54 lightweight torpedoes, pre-released by SH-60R Seahawk helicopters that had been holding station on the contact position since 3:30 a.m., entered the water against the 2 most advanced contacts at 3:43 a.m., 2 minutes into the engagement before either submarine had achieved a confirmed torpedo firing solution. The 3rd contact, which had been running deeper and slower than the other 2, was engaged by a Mk-48 heavyweight torpedo from the Virginia-class submarine that had been tracking it from a position northeast of the group since 3:15 a.m. The Mk-48 engagement at 3:44 a.m. was the first heavyweight torpedo employment against a live submarine contact by a U.S. submarine in over 40 years. The target contact ceased active maneuvering and began an emergency depth descent. It had detected the Mk-48 acquisition on its own passive sonar and was evading rather than firing. The 4th Fateh-class contact, which had been stationary at depth since 2 a.m. and had not accelerated with the other 3, did not maneuver, did not transmit, and did not achieve a firing solution during the engagement window. It was held under continuous tracking by the Virginia. Whether it chose not to act or had not received the execute signal through the coordination relay that had been taken offline 7 days earlier was a question the post-mission intelligence analysis would examine for months. By 4:09 a.m., the Gulf engagement sequence was complete. All 11 Khalij Fars tracks addressed. 50 of 53 Noor cruise missiles neutralized. 3 submarines displaced from firing positions without torpedo release. 1 submarine stationary under Virginia tracking. Carrier group intact. 1 Noor cruise missile impacting water 180 meters from the carrier. No hull damage to any U.S. vessel. No U.S. personnel injuries in the Gulf theater. In the Red Sea, 1,840 nautical miles to the southwest, the engagement ran on a parallel timeline that the Gulf Carrier Group could see on its command displays but could not influence with any of its assets. The Red Sea Carrier Group had been at elevated readiness since the CENTCOM dual theater execute authorization arrived at 3:41 a.m. and 30 seconds. The E-2D Hawkeye on station north of the group had been tracking the Shahed 136 formation since 3:38 a.m., 3 minutes before the execute authorization. The slow-moving delta wing profiles appearing on its display as the launch signatures registered from Hodeidah Governorate. The tactical coordinator on the E-2D had logged the formation count at 61 contacts and had transmitted the threat picture to the carrier flag bridge at 3:39 a.m., 2 minutes before the Gulf launches confirmed the dual theater pattern. She had not waited for the dual theater recognition. She had reported what her radar showed. The Burkan 2H ballistic tracks were engaged by the Red Sea Carrier Group's SM-3 and SM-6 batteries from 3:44 a.m. through 3:51 a.m. The Burkan 2H was a less capable system than the Khalij Fars, shorter range, less maneuvering capability in terminal phase, a threat profile that the Aegis engagement architecture handled more comfortably than the simultaneous Gulf ASBM sequence. 16 of the 19 Burkan 2H tracks were intercepted in mid-course and early terminal phase. 3 required SM-6 terminal engagements. All 3 were resolved. Burkan 2H intercept rate, 100%. The 61 Shahed, 136 loitering munitions presented the volume engagement challenge. The Red Sea Group's SM-2 and ESSM batteries engaged the formation from the outer zone inward, working through the salvo at maximum cycle rate. 53 of the 61 Shahed 136 were neutralized in the outer and mid-range engagement zones. 8 reached the CIWS layer. 7 were neutralized at close range. The 8th, a Shahed that had descended to 60 meters altitude and executed a slow S-turn that placed it momentarily outside the primary CIWS acquisition cone, connected with the antenna array on the Red Sea Group's forward destroyer at 4:02 a.m. The 40-kilogram warhead detonated on the array mounting. The antenna array was rendered non-operational. No structural damage to the hull. 2 personnel on the bridge wing received minor fragment injuries from the array debris. The destroyer remained fully combat capable at reduced sensor function. 1 confirmed Shahed hit. 1 destroyer with a damaged antenna array. The Red Sea Group's carrier was undamaged. The mine threat in Bab-el-Mandeb was addressed by a response architecture that was already in motion. The NOTAM closing the southern approach channel to commercial traffic was transmitted at 3:49 a.m., 8 minutes after the mine deployment had been flagged by the P-8 Maritime Patrol aircraft covering the southern Red Sea approach, which had been tracking the 4 Houthi fast attack craft for 26 minutes before their mine deployment began. The mine-laying craft were engaged by air-delivered precision munitions from F/A 18E Super Hornets launched from the Red Sea carrier at 3:52 a.m., while the mine-laying operation was still in progress. 2 of the 4 fast attack craft were rendered non-operational on the water before completing their assigned mine deployment. 2 completed their deployments. 22 of the 34 intended mines entered the water before the craft were engaged. 12 mines short of the planned total, and the NOTAM already in effect. The mine clearance timeline for 22 influence mines in a 9 nautical mile approach corridor was assessed at 64 to 78 hours. The Bab-el-Mandeb southern approach channel was closed to commercial traffic for 64 hours. The economic effect on oil transit was measurable. Brent crude moved $9 per barrel in the 18 minutes following the NOTAM, and remained elevated for 31 hours before the clearance timeline confirmation dampened the price movement. The IRGC's economic shock mechanism had partially functioned in the Red Sea. It had not functioned in the Hormuz. The CENTCOM counter-operation execute orders for both theaters had been transmitted simultaneously at 3:47 a.m., 6 minutes into the engagement sequences, while both defensive engagements were still active. In the Gulf Theater, the counter-operation prioritized the IRGCN coastal infrastructure that had provided the Noor launch capability and the Khalij Fars staging sites on Keshem Island. Tomahawk cruise missiles from the Gulf Submarine Force entered the strait at 3:54 a.m. on inbound trajectories toward 6 coastal launcher positions and the Bandar Abbas IRGCN naval facility. JASSMER releases from B-1B Lancer aircraft that had been holding airborne alert east of the strait addressed the Keshem Island infrastructure and the Khalij Fars mobile launcher positions. By 4:31 a.m., 5 of the 6 coastal launcher positions had been assessed as operationally degraded. The Bandar Abbas facility's pier infrastructure and the fast attack boat maintenance complex had received confirmed impacts. The Khalij Fars launcher that had been mobile during the strike window, one of 3 assigned positions had been vacated between targeting and weapon impact, had not been reacquired in the first strike cycle. In the Red Sea Theater, the counter-operation addressed the Houthi launch infrastructure in Hodeidah and Taiz governorates using the same framework that had been applied in previous Red Sea engagements. JSOW glide weapons from the carrier air wing against valley launch positions, JASSMER from the B-1B package against the inland Shahed storage and assembly sites. 41 of 49 approved aim points received confirmed or assessed weapon impacts by 4:44 a.m. 8 aim points required follow-on assessment. The Birkin 2H mobile launcher positions in Thai's Governorate, which had relocated following launch in the standard Houthi post-launch repositioning pattern, required the F-35C sensor-to-shooter pairing to reacquire and retarget. 4 of 7 Birkin 2H mobile positions were reacquired and engaged in the follow-on cycle between 4:19 a.m. and 4:38 a.m. At 4:51 a.m., the IRGC's Hormuz reserve sequence activated. The same Jask coastal launch positions that had been addressed in a previous operational cycle, now carrying 31 Qatar cruise missiles on trajectories toward the Gulf carrier group. The reserve activation confirmed the operational assessment that the IRGC had pre-positioned this capability specifically for a second-wave employment after the primary sequence. The timing, 70 minutes after the initial launch, coordinated with the expected peak of U.S. munitions expenditure and command attention, was deliberate. The Gulf Carrier Group's SM-6 ready load had been reduced by the ASBM and first-wave cruise missile engagements. The Jask reserve wave was the instrument designed to exploit that reduction. 24 of the 31 Qatar cruise missiles were engaged and neutralized in the outer and mid-range zones. 7 reached the CIWS engagement layer. 6 were neutralized. The 7th impacted the ocean 340 meters from the lead destroyer's port quarter. Its guidance system had been disrupted in the terminal phase by the destroyer's onboard jamming package, deflecting the impact point from the ship's hull by a margin that the damage control team would later calculate had been equivalent to 1.8 seconds of flight time at terminal velocity. The ship was undamaged. The margin was logged in the post-engagement report without editorializing. The number spoke for itself. By 5:04 a.m., 83 minutes after first launch, both theaters had completed their primary engagement sequences. The Jask reserve wave had been the last kinetic event. Time from first dual theater detection to end of active engagement, both theaters, 83 minutes. Gulf Theater, IRGC and IRGCN weapons employed. 53 Noor anti-ship cruise missiles, 11 Khalij Fars ASBM, 4 Fateh-class submarine attack profiles. Reserve activation, 31 Qatar cruise missiles from Jask. Total Gulf kinetic weapons, 95 missiles. Gulf intercept rates. Khalij Fars ASBM, 100%, 11 of 11. Noor cruise missiles, first wave, 94.3%, 50 of 53, 3 penetrators, 0 hull hits. Qatar reserve wave, 77.4%, 24 of 31 7.2C high WS layer, 6 neutralized, 1 ocean impact 340 meters from destroyer. Combined Gulf intercept rate, 91.6%. Red Sea Theater, Houthi weapons employed, 61 Shahed, 136 loitering munitions, 19 Birkin 2H ballistic missiles, 34 naval mines attempted, 22 deployed before interdiction. Total Red Sea kinetic, 80 platforms plus 22 mines. Red Sea intercept rates, Birkin 2H 100%, 19 of 19. Shahed 136, 88.5%, 54 of 61. 1 confirmed hit on destroyer antenna array. Combined Red Sea intercept rate, 91.1%. Combined dual theater intercept rate across all missile and loitering munition categories, 91.4%. Effects: Gulf, 1 Noor ocean, impact 180 meters from carrier, no hull damage. 1 Qatar ocean impact 340 meters from destroyer, no hull damage. 3 submarines displaced from firing positions without torpedo release. Red Sea, 1 Shahed, hit on destroyer antenna array. Non-structural, 2 minor personnel injuries. Bab-el-Mandeb Southern Channel closed 64 hours for mine clearance. Brent crude moved $9 per barrel, sustained 31 hours. The U.S. assets, 2 destroyer antenna arrays with minor damage, both combat-capable at reduced sensor function. Gulf destroyer SM-6, ready load at 44%. Red Sea Carrier Group SM-2 and ESSM, ready load at 58%. 2 minor personnel injuries, 0 hull losses. Both carriers fully operational throughout. Counter-operation munitions, 74 Tomahawk and JASSM ER in Gulf Theater, 62 JESO and JASSM ER in Red Sea Theater. Total, 136 distinct offensive weapons across both theaters. Combined munitions cost approximately $290 million. The IRGC and Houthi command structures had spent 9 months planning a coordinated 2-theater operation designed to force a U.S. prioritization decision that the pre-coordinated response architecture had already answered. The dual-theater activation had not created a decision crisis. It had created a dual-theater engagement that the pre-coordinated architecture had managed simultaneously, at the cost of reduced munitions ready loads in both theaters and 64 hours of commercial traffic disruption in Bab-el-Mandeb. The economic effect, the $9 per barrel Brent crude movement that had partially materialized through the mine threat, was the one measurable indicator that fell on the IRGC's side of the ledger. It had lasted 31 hours. The Strait of Hormuz had not closed. Both carriers had operated continuously. The IRGCN submarine force had not achieved a single torpedo release. 9 months of coordination. 83 minutes of engagement. A $9 barrel movement that lasted 31 hours. The CENTCOM watch officer, who had recognized the dual theater pattern in 4 seconds, updated the operational status board at 5:11 a.m. She had been on duty for 7 hours. She logged the final engagement confirmation, flagged the munitions resupply timelines for both theaters, and transmitted the status report to the CENTCOM commander. She had been awake since 10 p.m. Her coffee had been cold for 3 hours. She drank it anyway. The board was accurate. The report was transmitted. The watch continued.